Wu Fei is the modern-day Chen Shimi. More than 20 years ago, when he was still a long-term contract worker, he started dating Rong Zhen, a beautiful young woman who was unemployed at the time. He sweet-talked her into bed. 2 months later, Wu Fei's family bribed his superiors, and he managed to secure a permanent position. Once he was on the rise, Wu Fei immediately dumped Rong Zhen and married the director's cousin, who was an elementary school teacher. The town was small, with only one elementary school. Most of the teachers were well-known and respected by the locals. Wu Fei often took his wife out, flaunting their status. Many people sympathized with Rong Zhen. Rong Zhen's father worked at the same public institution and was entitled to have one child take over his position. Unfortunately, Rong Zhen was born a few years too late, so her sister got the job and Rong Zhen was left without formal employment. Rong Zhen's misfortunes seemed inevitable. If she had a steady job, perhaps Wu Fei wouldn't have left her. Back then, securing a stable job was all about luck. Veterans were guaranteed jobs, as were those with vocational diplomas, relatives of high-ranking officials, or those with connections. Rong Zhen had none of these advantages. She wasn't any worse than others. In fact, she was kind, graceful, and always smiled, making her well-liked. Older colleagues advised her to accept her fate, though she had already resigned herself to it. In such a small town, everyone knew her reputation. Having been used before marriage, and with Wu Fei boasting about it, she felt utterly disgraced. After that, she walked with her head down, always afraid the whispers she heard were about her. She regretted falling for Wu Fei's sweet words and promises, giving herself to him so easily. Who knew he would spread the news and then kick her to the curb, leaving her too ashamed to face anyone. Eventually, Rong Zhen moved to the city to work, taking a job in a clothing store on a busy street. She married a security officer, who treated her well. However, when the housing boom hit, they couldn't afford to buy a house. A few years later, Rong Zhen's father's workplace organized a collective housing project, and her family was allocated a unit. Wu Fei also got a unit. Rong Zhen's parents were just regular workers and hadn't saved much money over their lives. The family agreed that Rong Zhen and her husband would contribute most of the money, and they would all live together. Rong Zhen's family paid the deposit first, but they never expected that Wu Fei would buy an apartment in the same building, in the same unit. Now, her first love was living just upstairs, making for some awkward encounters. Rong Zhen's mother reassured her, "As long as you don't care about him, there's nothing to feel embarrassed about. Look at how ruthless he's been, and he doesn't feel any shame." Thanks to her mother's wisdom, Rong Zhen survived those difficult years. Now that things were what they were, there wasn't much else to do. They had no choice but to accept the situation. Rong Zhen's husband found out about Wu Fei, but he didn't mind much. After all, both couples were married with children. He even comforted Rong Zhen, telling her not to hold grudges and to greet Wu Fei if needed. Her husband had thick skin, nodding at Wu Fei as he would with any other neighbor. Rong Zhen felt awkward at first, pretending not to see Wu Fei, but eventually, she started nodding back. As time passed and they bumped into each other more often, it became normal. A few years later, their interactions were no different from those of any other neighbors. The small trees in the garden grew taller, and the children in the neighborhood grew up. Only those of the same generation or the elderly still remembered Rong Zhen's past. Rong Zhen noticed that people in the community were on her side. Her family was clearly more popular than Wu Fei's. The elderly would often play mahjong or chess near the entrance of their building, and if they needed a chair, they would grab one from her home. Sometimes, they would even drop by for a glass of water. When someone in the building made something delicious, they would bring a bowl over, lifting the mosquito net and walking right in as if it were their own home. On the rare occasion when the past was brought up, everyone agreed that Wu Fei had been despicable back then. But they would add, "Bad people can't hurt you, Rong Zhen. Look at how well you're living now." In the blink of an eye, Rong Zhen turned 45. She and her husband had bought a house in the city over 10 years ago and had already moved out, only returning to visit once or twice a month. Her husband had long since stopped working as a security officer. He started a small team doing renovations and made a decent amount of money over the years. Life had been peaceful and harmonious. One day, Rongjin received a call from her mother saying that Wu Fei was organizing an effort to install an external elevator for their building. Since Rongjin's family lived on the ground floor, they didn't want to agree. However, the policy stated that as long as 2/3 of the residents in the building agreed, the elevator could be installed. Rongjin and her husband rushed back to see what was going on. As soon as they entered the neighborhood, they could sense that the atmosphere was tense. Uncle Zhang from upstairs called out to her, "Rongjin, try to talk to your parents. We're getting old, and it's hard to go up and down the stairs. Since the ground floor won't have to pay, why cause trouble?" Someone nearby added, "Causing trouble won't help anyway. There are 12 units in total. If 8 of them agree, the elevator will go in." When Rongjin arrived home, her sister was already there and no one in the family was in a good mood. Her sister said, "Even if we don't have to pay, it'll block our sunlight and make a lot of noise. Now they're trying to guilt trip us, but why didn't they think about getting a lower floor when they bought their apartments? Didn't they realize they'd get old someday?" Their mother chimed in, "Your dad and I are light sleepers. An elevator rumbling right next to our window is just not going to work. But does it even matter if we're against it?" "No," her sister said angrily. "Other than us on the ground floor, I bet everyone else will agree. Having an elevator will make their apartments easier to sell for a higher price. It's completely convenient for them and damages our interests." Rongjin's husband added, "The government is encouraging the installation of elevators in old residential buildings now. After it's done, they can apply for a 100,000 yuan subsidy from the government. An elevator costs around 400,000, and with 10 households splitting 300,000, they won't have to pay much at all. Of course, they want it. Usually, the higher floors pay more and the lower floors pay less. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors are the ones who benefit the most." Rongjin's sister said, "It's not fair." Their mother sighed, "Complaining about fairness now won't help. As long as 8 households agree, they can install it." The whole family let out a sigh. Unexpectedly, some residents on the 2nd and 3rd floors were also against the elevator installation. The 2 units on the 2nd floor had been sold to young people who weren't part of the original community. They didn't have much money and didn't mind climbing the stairs. On the 3rd floor, one family had moved away permanently and rented out their apartment. They didn't want to pay for something that would only benefit the tenants. As for the elderly couple living across from Rongjin's family, they both had mental health issues and were adamantly against the elevator, refusing to budge. As a result, whether Rongjin's family agreed or not became crucial. The other residents who supported the installation started pressuring Rongjin's family, knowing they were the easiest to talk to. After all, if they upset the elderly couple across the hall, those with mental health problems could attack without consequence. The young residents on the 2nd floor were outsiders, too busy with their own lives to care, and the 3rd floor family was unreachable. That left Rongjin's family as the most approachable. The very next day, people came knocking on their door. "Why don't you think about us? We're all old neighbors and colleagues. We've been living here together for so many years." Some said, "You can't be so selfish." Others even stood outside Rongjin's mother's window, saying, "No wonder Wu Fei didn't want Rongjin back then." Wu Fei always considered the bigger picture, but look at Rongjin's family, only thinking about themselves. When these words reached Rongjin, she was so furious her heart ached. When there's no conflict of interest, people seem decent enough. But the moment personal stakes are involved, they turn on you faster than flipping a page. Rongjin, who had already been against the elevator installation, was now more determined than ever to have her parents refuse to agree. Wu Fei actually called. Rongjin didn't have his number saved, but she picked up when she saw an unknown number. "It's me," Wu Fei said loudly. "What's up?" she replied. "Can I call for no reason?" Rongjin remained silent. "Well, It's been a long time, and I thought I'd invite you and your husband for a meal. We've been pretty busy lately. Come on, still holding a grudge, huh? He teased, leaving Rongzhen speechless again. Years have passed, and you're still upset? Rongzhen, I always thought you were sensible, so why are you so stuck on this? You married a good man. Life's been treating you well, and I've been genuinely happy for you. Don't keep holding on to old things in your heart. Are you calling about the elevator? Rongzhen was annoyed by his roundabout talking. Wu Fei replied, yes and no. I just feel like your family still holds something against me. We don't. Come on, don't deny it. Your parents give me the cold shoulder whenever they see me. Tell me, how can I make it up to them? Even over the phone, Rongzhen could sense his fake, sleazy smile. She was about to hang up when Wu Fei added, I'm really going through a rough time. My dad's paralyzed, and I want to bring him over to live with me. But without an elevator, it's impossible. Rongzhen wanted to say, then go buy a place with an elevator, but couldn't bring herself to be that harsh. Snarky comebacks and full-blown arguments were not her forte. In her life, it seemed her only real talent was bottling up her anger. She'd get upset, stew in it for a while, and eventually, it would pass, like everything else. But dealing with someone as shameless as Wu Fei, she didn't know how long she'd be fuming this time. As if he knew what she was thinking, Wu Fei continued, You've seen my financial situation. If I were as well off as your family, I'd have bought a place with an elevator already. He went on, mixing complaints with flattery, finishing with, forgive and forget, right? Rongzhen replied, I can't out-argue you, and I certainly can't out-scheme you. A week later, Rongzhen and her husband went to visit her parents, and the whole building seemed to be giving them cold looks. An auntie from the fourth floor, leaning on her cane, came downstairs. When she saw Rongzhen's motorcycle parked near the entrance, she tapped it with her cane and scolded, always parking in the way. Your whole family's blind. Seriously, the path was wide, yet she chose to walk right where the motorcycle was, just to smack it and act righteous? Then they ran into Uncle Zhang, who was returning from grocery shopping. He said to Rongzhen, Wu Fei posted your phone call in the group chat. You said you couldn't be as bad as him. He's not that bad, child. He's just thinking of us useless old folks. Rongzhen was speechless. She regretted that slip of the tongue, now used against her as leverage. What started as a matter of installing an elevator had now escalated to resurfacing old scandals from her past. She walked into her parents' home, fuming, and her mother didn't look too happy either. She mentioned that the neighbors had been ostracizing them recently. All the households in the building who wanted the elevator installed had zeroed in on them, attacking her family specifically. Calling them selfish was the mildest of the insults. Some even claimed that their family was making a fuss just to extort money. Not that they were, but even if they were, so what? Rongzhen had heard that in some old buildings, the first-floor residents were indeed compensated for elevator installations. But this group of people wasn't willing to compensate the first floor at all. Their strategy was to target the weakest household, use moral coercion, label them as heartless, and even dredge up the old scandal with Wu Fei, making it seem like Rongzhen was still bitter about their past, seeking revenge under the guise of this dispute. Her mother added that the square-dancing crowd had started gathering right outside their door. Every evening, their loudspeakers blared, giving her a headache. There was even an incident where her mother was carrying a bag of fruit home, and the bag broke in the stairwell, spilling fruit everywhere. Not a single person helped her pick it up. The son of her old friend from the fourth floor even ran over the fruit with his scooter. Her mother clutched her chest as she recounted, "It's just too much bullying." Her father, exasperated, said, "Maybe we should just give in and let them install it." But Rongzhen firmly replied, "No." In the end, the elevator installation began after the elderly man across from them agreed to it. Rongzhen saw the man's son chatting enthusiastically with Wu Fei at the bottom of the building. Since when did they become such good friends? Her husband guessed, they probably settled it privately with some money. Who knows the details? Either way, the construction rumbled on, and other buildings in the complex wanted to follow suit, coming to Wu Fei for advice on how he got it done. Whatever Wu Fei told them, the whole neighborhood seemed to have turned against Rongjun's family. Residents from other first-floor apartments, who had resisted, would stop Rongjun at night, ask her a few questions in hushed voices, and quickly leave, their faces filled with anxiety. Once the elevator was installed, it had a huge impact on Rongjun's parents. The noise from the elevator wasn't the worst part. It was the constant dinging as it moved up and down through the night, right outside her mom's window, driving her crazy. Around that time, her husband couldn't collect a sum of money owed to him, and the other party offered him the down payment on a small 70-square-meter courtyard house instead. It was in a remote area, but the scenery was nice, making it a good fit for her parents. After some discussion, they bit the bullet, selling the old apartment and moving her parents into the courtyard house. The renovation on the new place went quickly, and once it was ready, they sold the apartment. On moving day, the old neighbors passed by as if they didn't know the family, casting indifferent glances. Wu Fei, however, bumped into them after work, looking proud as ever. "Moving, huh? Need a hand?" he called out, all while getting into the elevator. Everything, except the workers, felt lifeless. Even the winter afternoon sunlight seemed ancient and desolate. As they were about to leave, Rongjun's parents looked back at their old home. "We're never coming back, are we?" her mother asked. "What's the point of coming back?" her father replied. The elderly couple sighed deeply. They had lived there for most of their lives, from when the area was just rows of old houses. Everything had been so familiar, but now everything felt alien. At their age, they were uprooted. 6 months later, Rongjun and her sister went to their parents' new place for dinner. Her sister said that Wu Fei finally got what was coming to him. "What happened?" Rongjun asked. "Remember how he organized the whole elevator installation? He promised the son of the old man across from us 8,000 yuan as compensation to agree to it. But later, the guy somehow found out that Wu Fei pocketed nearly 40,000 yuan in kickbacks from the elevator company. The guy was furious and demanded more money. When Wu Fei refused, he exposed the whole thing. Now the entire building is tearing him apart. Did he agree to return money? He promised to return it proportionally, but the whole building is a mess. Some people say the original compensation scheme wasn't fair. Others are complaining about tenants on the 3rd floor using the elevator without paying, and now they want to install a card reader to restrict access. But that adds costs and nobody wants to pay. It's a complete mess. Rongjun's father chimed in, "Living in a house on the ground is better." It wasn't clear if he meant the courtyard house they lived in now, or was reminiscing about the days when everyone in the unit lived in simple, single-story houses. Back then, the rows of brick houses stretched on, orderly and neat. There were small hills in the distance, and a river not far from the houses. During rush hour, groups of workers would ride their bicycles, greeting each other warmly. Rongjun could still vaguely remember those scenes, and how she first met Wu Fei back then. He had a fancy, gear-shifting bicycle and would ride it like a panther, looking incredibly cool. That year, every time he rode by and flashed her that mischievous smile, it made her feel like life was worth it. But that place, those people, that time, they were gone forever. And even if she could go back, after seeing how it all ended, she wouldn't want to.